Do you know about the Mischief men, Chris? My cousin Caitlin asked the question out of the blue, halfway through building our Lego castle. She picked up a red brick and placed it at the top of the blue wall. I ignored the OCD itch at the back of my head, reminding myself that she was only 5. My Uncle Tim's wife had passed away a year earlier. He had asked if I could watch Caitlin while he was on a business trip. Nope. I grabbed a red brick and placed it next to hers before shrugging with a smile. I decided if I couldn't fight the OCD, I might as well try and make a new pattern. Oh, well, why don't you know about them? She seemed disappointed. They come at night and move things around. Daddy gets mad about it. He thinks it's me, but it's not. Tim had told me about the fact that Caitlin had been acting out lately. She'd been getting out of bed in the middle of the night and moving things around in the living room, turning on faucets and lights and just doing little things for attention. Tim had said that he was blaming it on imaginary friends. I figured that's who these Mischief men were. Well, what did they look like? I decided to indulge her imagination and learn more about her imaginary friends. Are you crazy? There was a look of shock on her face, as if I had offended her by asking the question. They're investable. I snickered at her mispronunciation. You mean invisible. She gave me a curious look and then shook her head yes. I've seen them move stuff, though. She was playing with the blocks as if she was telling me about her day in preschool. I asked them if they were ghosts, but they said no. Oh, so you've talked to them? I was still smiling, but I could feel a chill creep into my spine. Something felt very strange. My uncle wouldn't be back for the whole weekend, and for the first time that Friday evening, I started to feel a little like maybe I wasn't ready for this. I was 16, and had babysitting jobs before, but this was the first time I would be watching a kid for the whole week. Of course I have! She looked up at me with big puppy dog eyes and a little smile on her face. I started to wonder how I was letting her get to me with this tall tale. Her acting out made perfect sense. Her mother's sudden death from an embolism had shocked us all. I had no idea how a kid could even process something like that. They told me to stay in bed, and I should go back to sleep, and that they'll come back and visit with me. Oh, do they now? I think they just like to play pranks, like the ones in my book. She smiled and grabbed another red brick, stacking it on top of the last one. In your book? She rolled her eyes at me in the way that only a 5-year-old can, and brought me back a tattered old children's book titled The Mischief Men. I thumbed through it, and it seemed to be about a group of little elves who went around and played pranks. But they learned in the end that pranks can get you in trouble. Typical little don't-be-bad tale for kids, standard fare, if oddly titled. Want me to read this to you tonight before bed? I asked, holding the book up. She shook her head no and grabbed the book from my hand. She took it over to her bookshelf and pulled out another one about dinosaurs and brought that one over. Read this one instead. I like this one. She smiled and went and sat back down in front of the blocks. You got it, kiddo. I set the book down next to me and looked over at the clock. It was 8:15 p.m. already. Speaking of bedtime, we gotta get your PJs on and get you in bed. She frowned and complained about not being done with the castle, but I insisted. We got her PJs on and her teeth brushed. I read her the dinosaur book, and she ended up falling asleep before we got to the Triceratops. She had worn me out that afternoon before her dad had even left playing games with me, and I was beat too. I decided that I would probably just lay on the couch and watch TV till I fell asleep. I made it a quarter of the way into an episode of one of those CSI shows before I, too, was out like a light. I woke up at about 2:30 a.m. according to the clock under the living room television. My throat felt dry and my body ached from falling asleep oddly on the couch. I sat up with a groggy, swimming head and navigated my way to the kitchen using the soft blue light from the television. I got my water and started making my way back towards the living room to shut off the television. And suddenly I smacked my knee on a dining room chair that was suddenly blocking my path. "Motherfucker," I said. The water I was drinking spilled down the front of my shirt, and a sharp pain shot through my knee. Once I collected myself, I was struck by confusion. I had come through that exact same way only a few seconds before, and there was no chair. "Caitlin!" I yelled, the annoyance crystal clear in my voice. "That wasn't funny. I could have tripped. Get your little butt back in bed now." I pushed the chair out of the way and peeked around the corner into the hall. I expected to at least catch Caitlin fleeing back to her room, but instead I saw nothing but the closed bedroom doors and a hallway ending in darkness. "Quick little bastard, aren't you?" I smiled. Even though my knee hurt and my shirt was wet, I was somewhat impressed. She did it without me even seeing her. I turned back towards the living room and went to shut off the TV again. I just wanted to crawl into bed and sleep. When I was only a few steps away from the remote, the TV suddenly shut off on its own. The TV suddenly shut off on its own. I stood there for a few seconds looking at the remote control and realizing that there was no way for anyone to turn off the TV that wasn't directly in front of me. That's when I felt the presence of someone standing behind me. It sent a shiver through my body, and I slowly set my glass of water on the table. I hoped it was just Caitlin messing with me. Maybe she had an extra remote and decided to play a trick on her cousin. Give him a few doses of Mischief on his first night babysitting. I felt eyes on me, though. Something deep in the pit of my stomach told me that they were not the eyes of a playful 5-year-old. I leapt towards the living room light, nearly tripping over my feet as I reached for the switch. Light suddenly filled the room, and I spun on my heels, afraid of what I was going to see. I saw... it was nothing at all. Very investable. Caitlin's words ran through my head as I stood there, staring at the dining room table and the empty kitchen beyond. Oh, that's insane, Chris, I told myself. It's just a book and an overactive imagination. I took a deep breath and flicked the light off, wondering what exactly I was allowing myself to get so paranoid over. So I missed a chair in the dark. The TV shut off on its own, probably from a damn timer, and I got spooked in the dark. Jesus, Chris. I laughed to myself and grabbed my water off the table. I took another sip and set the glass down again. No sooner had it left my hand than it suddenly went flipping off the table and shattered against the far wall. I barely had time to jump before it seemed the whole living room went insane with activity. The living room table shot off to one side, slamming into the bar that separated the living room and the kitchen. All the chairs slid in opposite directions, smashing into the couch, most of them tipping over. All the kitchen cabinets flew open at once, and pots and pans and dishes came raining down. I listened as they clanged and shattered on the linoleum. A startled scream froze in my throat as the TV flickered on and off, illuminating the shadow of something moving across the room towards the hall. It was tall, nearly 8 feet tall if I had to guess, and it was as thin as a rail. Its arms and legs at least twice the size of its torso. Its head appeared bulbous and too large for its thin frame. I couldn't see the actual thing itself, just a shadow transposed on the wall in the flickering blue glow of the television. They're investable. Picture frames fell off the walls as it moved, as if its shadows were knocking them down. As one of Caitlin fell from the wall, I realized where the thing was headed, jumped over the couch and headed towards it. One of the chairs hopped off the floor and struck me over the shoulder, knocking me off my feet. I howled in pain as I slammed my elbow into another chair on the way down. I tried to keep moving, but household objects continued to fly at me as I made my way down the hall. More chairs, pots, and pans flew from the kitchen, banging against the walls as I did my best to dodge them. I saw the door to Caitlin's room open and tried to scream for her, but before the words left my mouth, a picture frame struck me just above the right eye. I fell onto my ass and felt a warm trickle of blood leak down my face. I shook my head clear and got to my feet just in time to hear Caitlin's door slam closed. The thing was in there with her. I got to my feet and sprinted the last few feet to the door. I wrenched at the door handle as best as I could. It was as if it had been nailed shut. I screamed for Caitlin. I could hear her sweet little voice talking just beyond. "What about Chris?" she asked whoever was in there with her. I heard no response. "Why can't he come?" I pounded my fist against the door. I kicked against the wood as some sort of dim white glow started leaking from beneath the crack of the door. "Can he come later? Will Mommy be there?" The light got brighter, and I could feel the door vibrating beneath it. I continued beating a tattoo into it with my fists. "I don't know. But you gotta stop doing bad stuff. Daddy gets mad." I shouldered into the door as hard as I could, tears streaming down my face. I had no idea what was happening, but I knew exactly what was about to happen. The light grew brighter. "You promise?" "Okay. You don't look like you do in my book. You look funny." She giggled. The last sound I ever heard out of my cousin's mouth was that innocent little giggle. The door suddenly flew open, and I was nearly blinded by the brightness of the light pouring out of that room. All I could see beyond was a blur of shapes, 3 that looked like the shadow I had seen before, tall, thin things with bulbous heads. The one in the center was holding my cousin's hand. They were walking towards what should have been a wall. I screamed till my throat hurt and reached out for them, but it was all silence in my own ears. Some great rumble had filled the house, and something that felt like electricity had filled the air. The hair on my arms stood up, and I felt like my brain was on fire. I tried to run towards them, but was thrown backwards hard. My back crashed against the wall of the hallway, and I watched, dazed and helpless, as the things walked away with my cousin, walked away into the light. Just as quickly as it all started, it ended. The light blinked out. The rumble stopped. And Caitlin was gone. I was left alone in a house that looked like someone had let a wild animal loose in it. I searched the whole place for Caitlin. I hoped in my heart that I could find her, that she was still there. And I was wrong. She had vanished. They had taken her. The Mischief men. My uncle never forgave me. I like to think that he would have in time, but he died of a heart attack 2 months after Caitlin disappeared. It's been a year. And I relive that night every time I close my eyes. I can remember the search parties, beating the bushes around the woods, looking for Caitlin, the Amber Alerts. No one believes the testimony of a traumatized 16-year-old boy. I knew, though. I knew they would never find her.